everybody. Welcome. Getting all settled in. I see a hand raised. There is a Q&A option. So if you have any questions, hello. Right on. Let's get everybody settled in. Yay. You guys can use the emojis if you'd like. I love being able to see your participation. I hope you guys are ready to learn about the gray whale road trip. I'm just gonna give another moment. Where am I? I am in Point Mugu State Park. This is for Point Dume State Beach. Right on, loving the participation. So once I get started, I'll get all of you oriented with where I am. All right, I'll give you guys one more minute. All right, looks like we're all loaded up and ready to go. Let me go ahead and share my screen. All right, hopefully no notifications pop up. Well, hello everybody. My name is Hannah and welcome. You're joining me in Malibu, where I'm gonna teach you guys about the gray whale road trip and why Point Dume State Beach, Nature Preserve, and Marine Protected Area is so special to their journey. If you guys want to leave in the chat how many students you have in your class, that'd be awesome. Or in the Q&A, that'd be great. That would help me out. Let me just pull up the Q&A so I can watch it while we're chatting. Good sleepy weather. I agree. What kind of rock is behind me? The rock behind me is actually volcanic rock. This area is connected to the transverse range. Whoopsie. So as I said, I'm in Malibu, California. This blue dot here is where I am located, just past the Channel Islands and within the coastline of Malibu, California, right off the Pacific Coast Highway. Point Dume State Beach is along that area, and it's what we call a promontory headland. And this promontory headland is what jets out into the ocean and is used for navigation. It's a form of landmark that is what makes our coastline very special and as navigation for navigational uses. And Point Dume is not only a California state beach or a marine protected area, it's also a nature preserve and a state marine reserve, which means that the coastline, the ocean, and the land is all protected and has special regulations so that there is a abundance of biodiversity. And Point Dume is actually most well known for their giant coreopsis. The giant coreopsis are a type of sunflower and a type of succulent. All right, just making sure I'm taking a look at the Q&A. I can't see your screen share. I can't see anything. Uh-oh. Is that from everybody? Well, before we keep going and we learn more about the gray whales, I would like to give a land acknowledgement to the Chumash that live and resided in this area. We recognize and acknowledge the first people of the ancestral and unceded territory of the community of Sumo, meaning abundance, on the traditional homelands of the Mitzgarakan Chumash people that is now occupied in part by Point Dume State Beach. As guest stewards of this land, we respectfully honor the ancestors and their descendants who are still here and are members of the Babaranyo Ventura Band of Mission Indians. I like to put this up because it gives us all an opportunity to see these words that we're not used to and understand their meanings in a different way. So with the Chumash, within different regions, they have different names for the villages of their area. So for Sumo, which is right outside of Point Dume, Sumo means abundance. And we can see on this map, right where it says Santa Monica Mountains, a big jet or a big landmark that jets out into the ocean. And this is Point Dume. And you can see on the side of it, Sumo is where it resides. And Sumo was a very abundant village. We have a lot of exploring Chumash that would hunt and gather in this area on their plank tamol canoes that were made of redwood planks and tar. And they would use these to hunt and gather sustainably within our coves of the Santa Monica Bay. And they understood this relationship where if they hunted too much or they collected too much, then they weren't able to have more resources in the future. So they kept this moral of collecting sustainably so that these species could continue to thrive over time so that they could continue to feed their villages. And they had a very good relationship with whales. Whales were not hunted. Whales were only harvested or collected and gathered from when they would pass away and become stranded on the shoreline. When this would happen, the Chumash would use everything they could from whale because this was seen as a great blessing. They would use, as you can see, giant rib bones to add extra support to their homes. Their homes are called ops, spelled A-P. And these ops were made from tule reeds and willow branches that were found collected in creek beds because they're very flexible and they're able to be used in these big and wonderful huts. The Chumash would also resource from whale their spinal vertebrae. These big vertebrae were actually used as stools, and some of them were actually ornately designed with tar and beads, and they were very special for guests that would visit. Other bones were used for hooks or even pry bars that they would use to remove mussels from rocks. They would also use, of course, the meat for food and the blubber or the fat that surrounded the whale for waterproofing their hides or their skins that they would hunt from animals. And they would use that as clothing, or they would use it as a doorway to protect their home from weather or heavy winds. All right, if we're in a classroom, I would love if you could make a mental map with me or just get a piece of paper out and follow along if you want to take some notes in your classroom. Otherwise, we're going to meet the star of the show. We're going to meet Pahat. Pahat in Chumash is whale. And Pahat is an 11-month-old gray whale that's making his first migration up the Pacific coast and passing through Point Dume State Beach. And of course, we have lots of questions for Pahat, but what we want to know is what does he need for his trip? And before we ask him, because he's telling me some stuff already, is in your classroom, maybe talk to your partner. And think of two things. What do you normally need for your road trip? What do you normally take? What's some necessities that you need when you're in the car for a long journey? So I'm going to check out the Q&A and I'm just going to see what some of the answers are. All right. Okay, cool. Our whole class can't see anything. We can only see half of the screen. Water balloons, water, food. Entertainment, yeah, like a book or some movies or a video game. Okay, so I just want to make sure, can you guys see my slides? Blanket, definitely. Air conditioning, yes. Okay, cool. Yeah, those are some great answers. And when I asked Pahat, what does he need for his road trip? What does he need to pack? He says that he has everything that he needs on his entire body for the journey. And he's telling me that the only way to remember this is actually by remembering whale. WHALE. And if you're writing notes, we're going to write that up and down vertically on your piece of paper. And we're going to start with W. W stands for warm-blooded. Pahat has a 10-inch layer of fat surrounding his entire body. This fat is not only to keep him warm like a very comfortable blanket, it's also a food source that he uses as he swims up the coast. Because as he swims, he's using that fat as nutrients as he swims. Also, if he gets too hot, he has veins and arteries that run along his skin, underneath his skin, that help his warm blood to pump through his body. And as he swims, the cold ocean actually absorbs the heat off of the surface of his skin. And if he's way too hot, he can open his mouth and let the water run along his tongue because he has veins and arteries on his tongue too. So W is warm-blooded. Now let's go to H, hair. Oh yeah, Pahat is a marine mammal, which means he's warm-blooded, he grows hair, and some more stuff. But for now, we're going to understand these lumpies and bumpies that he has all over his head. This is what we call a rostrum. His snout or his nose is called a rostrum. And these lumpies and bumpies are vibrissae. And on this vibrissae are hairs. And they're a type of whisker. These whiskers help Pahat as he swims, and he's learning to navigate the ocean. And over time, they'll wear away as he becomes stronger and more aware of the area around him. But he's learning how close his mother is to him, how close he is to the sea floor, or where food is around him. And another form of hair that grows in Pahat's mouth is what we call baleen. If you remember from Finding Nemo, when Marlin and Dory are sitting inside the whale's mouth, you can see all these little hairs floating around. And those hairs are actually the texture of your fingernail, and they're made of keratin. And they're attached to the roof of his mouth like big combs that come down, and they're filters that Pahat uses to feed. So H is hair. The next letter is A for air breather. Pahat has two blowholes at the top of his head. Unlike us, we have our nose at the front of our face. He uses his blowholes that are directly connected to his lungs to breathe when he comes to the surface because he is a mammal, which means he's not using his gills to breathe underwater. He's having to take deep breaths and dive down, where he can hold his breath up to 15 minutes at a time. And when he comes to the surface, he can fill his lungs up to 90% capacity in one breath of 3 seconds. Woo, that's crazy. A few of these photos at the bottom were both taken at Point Dume by myself. These are of whales that were migrating along our coast and that I got to see with my own eyes. Pahat also has what we call throat grooves. And you can see in this picture above, these throat grooves are similar to what you would see on a frog, where he would expand his throat very big, but instead it's not being filled with air, it would be filled with water. It gives him the ability, like an accordion, to expand his throat so that he's able to take big gulps of food, mud, and water. So A is air breather. L is live birth. When Pahat was born, he looked just like this inside his mother. And when he came out, he was like, oh my gosh, he could barely swim because his flippers and his flukes were so flimsy that he has to learn how to swim over time to get them stronger. And you can see in this photo that Pahat's flipper is extremely similar to a human hand. They actually have the same amount of bones. They're just elongated or a lot longer than ours because he has evolved to swim compared to us holding and gripping things. So these are flippers on Pahat, and he uses them in order to propel himself forward and help him to steer. Pahat also has a very strong tail. But on this tail, you're not seeing a dorsal fin like you would see on a dolphin or a shark. Some whales do have teeny tiny dorsal fins, but Pahat has a dorsal ridge or a dorsal hump. And on this ridge are knuckles. More lumpies and bumpies on this guy. And this is the strongest muscle in his entire body because Pahat takes deep dives to the ocean floor. So he needs a strong tail to get him down there. And on his tail is what we call a fluke. These flukes are also called lobes or fans, but these are flukes on a whale. And so he has flippers and flukes. So L is live birth, and our last one is E, eats milk. Pahat right now is the size of a Volkswagen Beetle. Yeah, and that means he's hungry all the time. And while he's swimming, all his mom hears is, I'm hungry, for thousands of miles. And every single day, she has to feed him up to 50 gallons of milk. And that milk, like we talked about earlier, is coming from the blubber or the fat, the resource, the food source that Pahat has on him at all times. That means that the milk that's being dispersed is actually 50% fat, which makes it a lot easier for Pahat to eat because he's using his special eyes that bend at low light and adjust to high pressures and low pressures. So he's able to eat the milk without it mixing with the water. Okay, so if we look back at our notes, we have whale written down and we have warm-blooded, air breather, live birth, and eats milk. And this is what Pahat needs for his trip because he is a marine mammal and he has everything he needs for his trip. All right, whew. We learned a lot so far. I think it's time to get up and get some wiggles out. Are you guys down? I am. So we're gonna stand up and we're gonna make sure we have some space. Just make sure you're not touching anybody or hitting anybody or getting any way. And we're gonna keep our little feet grounded and we're gonna do some whale behavior. First thing we're gonna do, oh, and Pahat wants to help me, is spy hopping. We're gonna create our water line. Our water line is where we're underneath the surface of the water. Spy hopping is what whales use to see where they are as they swim. So I'm underneath the water right now. I've been swimming a long time and I have no idea where I am. So I'm gonna come up. Oh, what was that? Okay, I'm gonna try one more time. And we're coming up and we're gonna look around. We're gonna use our eye just above the surface and we're gonna look around and we're gonna come back down. We're gonna do it again. Come up. We're gonna look around. Oh, you know what I see? I see Point Dume. And I'm gonna come back down. One more time. We're gonna come up. Okay, I know where I am. I'm gonna start heading into the shore and I'm gonna come back down. All right. And my next thing I'm gonna do is diving. So what we need to do is we take our arms, we're gonna put our wrists together and we're gonna create our fins, or excuse me, our flukes. This is our big tail, our big strong tail. And I want everybody to know I'm here. So I'm gonna slap the water. Slap, 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 slap. Slap, slap. I'm gonna just keep slapping it. Slap, slap. We're making all this noise. All these whales know we're here, and they know that there's a party at Point Dume. And in order to get closer, I need to dive. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna lift up my tail and shimmy down. All right, we're gonna do that again. We're gonna lift our tail up and shimmy down. One more time, lift our tail up and shimmy down. Good job. All right, next one, we're gonna be mind blown. We're gonna simulate a blow. But first, we have to evolve a little bit. So our nose is right here, and we need it to be at the top of our head. So what we're gonna do is go boop, boop, boop. And then our nose, our blowholes are at the top of our head. So now that we're here, when whales blow, it's the shape of a heart. And actually, the majority of this is mucus. So don't get it on, you guys. We're gonna take a deep breath. One more time. Let's do it for fun. Good job, guys. I would love to do one more, but this takes a lot of work. It's called breaching. You've probably seen videos of this before when whales come all the way up out of the water and they slap on their backs onto the sea. So what we have to do is we bring our flippers to our side and we're gonna bend our legs. We're gonna bend our knees and we're gonna shoot up and fall back. Well, let's do it again. We're gonna bend our knees, shoot up out of the ocean, and fall back. Let's get experts. Nice. Now we know expert whale behavior. So if you go whale watching and you see this behavior going on, you know what's happening. Let me check the chat real quick while we're getting situated and sitting back down. Great job, everyone. That was fun. Let me take a quick sip. All right, let's keep rolling. We need to know more about Pahat. I want to ask him some more questions. The biggest question of all, when and where is Pahat going? Well, this is an annual journey. This means that Pahat and his mother are traveling all year round. And this trip can be up to 6,000 to 13,000 miles. Ooh. Imagine being in the car with your mom and dad from LA all the way to New York City and back for 3 times. That's a long trip. And imagine she's hearing, I'm hungry the whole way. This journey right now, Pahat is coming up from Mexico, where there are 4 main feeding and breeding grounds in Baja, Mexico. So that's that little area all the way down here at the bottom where it jets out from California. And that is when he turns around in springtime. So during the winter is where he was having a good time, he was eating food, hanging out with other whales, and now there's not a lot of food. So his mother and him are moving up the coast, up the Pacific coast, passing through Point Dume, of course, and giving us a lovely interview. And they're going to continue because it's springtime. And they're moving through California, and they're going to move through Oregon and Washington and make their way all the way up into Alaska for a summertime where they're going to meet a whole bunch of whales. They're going to eat so much food and fill up their blubber so it's nice and thick, because once winter comes around, the water's going to get cold up there and there's ice going to form and the food's going to go away, and they got to turn around and make their way all the way back down. And that's a long trip. And while they're swimming, they're staying in the shallow shoreline, which means they're staying on the coast. They're staying close, and that's why we can see them a lot of times if you go whale watching or if you're out on the beach. Sometimes you can see whale blows because Pahat's mother knows that it's not safe to swim out in open ocean because Pahat, as we learned, is not strong enough and has really weak flippers and fins to swim. So she needs to make sure that he's safe and that they can find lots of food. And my next question for you guys is maybe to discuss with your partner or within your class, where are the safest places to stop and the best restaurants that you stop at on your journey? And I will check out the chat just to hear where you guys stop when you're on your road trip. Taco Bell. Is there anywhere else you're stopping? I normally have to stop at a gas station, maybe a hotel sometimes. I love some Chick-fil-A. Yes, Chick-fil-A. 7-Eleven, you need snacks. Yes. These are great answers. The mountains and go for a picnic. Love that. In-N-Out, great. KFC, awesome. So, Pahat may not know where he's stopping and where the safest places are, but you know what? His mother does, and that's why they're stopping at Point Dume State Beach, because here is a marine protected area, which means there's special rules and regulations that prevent fishing, collecting, and harassing of any species along our coastline and in the ocean, all the way down 2,000 feet to the seafloor. And especially with boats, which are one of the main predators of whales, they have to stay at least 200 yards away from whales so that they do not disrupt their migration pattern. Because whales underneath the water have very sensitive ears. And when they hear all these loud noises, it distracts them, it disrupts them. They don't want to be near those things. They will go as far away as possible, which then will deter them from their original path. So, Pahat's mother knows that Point Dume State Beach is safe and it has an abundance of food. And along the California coast, there's actually 124 marine protected areas. So all along their journey, they're able to stop at all these great restaurants and the safest rest stops. But the best way for you to understand the goal of marine protected areas is for us to close our eyes. Trust me. We're going to close our eyes And we're going to imagine a grassy field. And there's lots of fluffy dandelions. And you're going to pluck one up. And you're going to take a deep breath. And you're going to make a wish. Keep your eyes closed because what we're watching are all the little seeds floating down into the grass. And they're nuzzling their way into the dirt. And then there's more fluffy dandelions. And that is the goal of marine protected areas. Marine protected areas create a safe and regulated area for biodiversity. Bio means life, like biology, and diversity is different or different things that things do. So biodiversity is living things having different jobs. So within an ecosystem or a habitat where all these different organisms live together, they all have different jobs that allow them to live and thrive and be abundant together because they all work together to keep everything harmonious and balanced. And over time, if fish start to become safe and comfortable, they're like, you know what? I'm going to lay some eggs. And when they lay their eggs and they disperse, these eggs feel safe too. And then they disperse farther. And maybe they'll move into the next marine protected area. And that is the goal. Over time, we want to protect and make these safe places aware to natural species so that they can continue to grow, grow and thrive together. Okay, we're gonna do another do it, where we simulate behavior. And even though Pahat isn't bottom feeding yet, you guys are gonna understand how whales bottom feed because whales have what we call baleen. So we're gonna stand up and make sure we have some room. And we're gonna use our baleen today. So first, we need to make sure we evolve. So make sure you have space, you're not touching anybody, you're grounded. And we're gonna take our nose and we're gonna go boop, boop, boop to the top of our head. So now our blowholes are up here. And we need our lower jaw. So we're gonna make a big lower jaw and we're gonna make our rostrum. So now our snout is ready. And we have all our lumpies and bumpies and our baleen in the inside of our mouth. And I'm starving and it's time for me to eat. So I'm gonna take a deep dive all the way to the seafloor and I'm gonna start mixing it up. I'm gonna push all this mud around. I'm gonna make big clouds underwater and I'm gonna open up my mouth and take a big old gulp and close my mouth. And in order to use my baleen to the best of my ability, I have to take my tongue and push all this water and mud out of my mouth. And what remains is food called amphipods all along my baleen. And I'm gonna lick it up. And now I am nice and full, and I got a big tummy, and I'm ready to keep swimming. Good job. Now you know how to bottom feed. Okay, so now I want you guys to use your eyes. We're gonna get our binoculars, and we're gonna take a look at these photos. So in the Q&A, if you guys could give me some responses of what you see. So some of the things you may see in these photos, maybe you see a blow. We see some condensation. We see some flippers, some flukes splashing water, yeah. What else do we see? Whoops. Oh no! Technical difficulties. So many slides. All right. Well, you know what I see? I see big clouds. I see a big cloud inside. Yeah, white stuff. And you guys know what that is? That is poop. Uh-huh, poop. And these photos were taken at Point Dume, right off the headland, and where I could see whales. They were swimming and feeding, and when they came to the surface, they were pooping. And you know what? That answers my next question, which is how do whales combat climate change? But in reality, will Pahat's trip or his route always be the same? Or will it change in the future? And unfortunately, it will, because we live during a time of climate change where things are changing, just like the temperature in our ocean is adjusting our natural currents that are slowing down. This also affects feeding and breeding times, which means if it gets too cold or too hot, then whales don't understand what season it is, and they're not able to start their migration to these areas where they can feed and breed with other whales. And if they miss that, then they don't get enough nutrients for their entire journey. And that's unfortunate. But a good way to understand how they combat climate change with poop is that whales are very experienced farmers. Mm-hmm. So we were talking about how whales bottom feed, and they mix up all that mud down there. But when they do this, they're diving, and they're doing this a lot, which means when they're at the top, they're pulling warm water down to the ocean floor where it's cold down there. Just like when you're in a pool and you're swimming in the shallow end and it's nice and warm, and then you get into the deep end and it's kind of cold down there. And that's because the sun can't get all the way down to the bottom. So what Pahat does as he swims is he's taking this cold water, or excuse me, warm water down with him while he dives. And he's getting down to the bottom and he's creating this natural cycle because he comes up and down and he's circulating this water. And when he dives, he's shutting off his digestive system and moving all of his oxygen into his other organs. So as he's feeding and moving all that food around, he's going to come up and he's going to poop. And he's letting all this poop come out. And this poop is full of nutrients and amphipods that he has eaten. So that means it's full of high quality fertilizer. So when this fertilizer is released into the ocean, it's actually fertilizing phytoplankton. And phytoplankton is a type of algae in the ocean. And this algae actually absorbs 40% of our global carbon emissions. That's what's coming from our cars, in big industrial areas, and even what we breathe. So this phytoplankton is actually absorbing a lot of that carbon dioxide and creating oxygen. So every other breath that you take is from the ocean. And not only is he fertilizing this phytoplankton, but the food that Pahat eats is eating that phytoplankton. And then Pahat eats that food. So he's fertilizing his own food chain. This is creating a natural carbon cycle for Pahat. And that makes him very special. And over time, his populations have increased because he was an endangered species. And now his species of Pacific gray whale is up to 25,000 whales. That's a huge number, but we need a whole lot more because they produce natural carbon cycle in our ocean that circulates and potentially helps and combats climate change. Okay, that was a little bit of a downer, but not really, because there are some things that you can do for Pahat and for his journey. And some of those things that you can do are reduce, reuse, and recycle. So you can reduce your use of plastic, You can reuse items like water bottles so that you're continuing to reduce that use of plastic. And you can learn how to recycle and what you can recycle. And those are some natural ways that you can start by producing results from your actions. Just like if you see trash along the beach or in your park or even in your yard or your street, you're doing your part to pick that up because eventually it might make its way back into the ocean, and we don't want to do that. So you need to be brave and kind to your environment. And that is what helps Pot on his journey. Wow, I just gave you guys lots of information about Pahat. At this point, do you guys have any questions? I will check the chat. What do they eat? So in this picture, actually, if you can see it at the bottom left, we see some humpback whales lunge feeding. Lunge feeding is when whales find a school of small fish, like small pelagic fish, which are types of anchovies or sardines that are swimming in big schools. So these whales will do a bubble technique where they release bubbles underneath the school to bring them to the surface. And as they're bringing them to the surface, they do a big lunge underneath them with their big mouth open, and they collect as many fish in their mouth as possible. Some other ways, like we learned with Pahat, is that they're bottom feeding. So there's bottom feeding and lunge feeding. And this is a type of feeding that we see with baleen whales. And there's two types of whales. There's baleen whales and tooth whales, so mystices and odontices. Mystices have their big baleen plates where they can have up to 150 plates in their mouth, like big combs that help filter their food. And when they go to the bottom of the ocean, they're eating what we call amphipods, which are tiny little organisms in the mud that are eating all the decaying stuff that make it to the bottom of the ocean. And these little organisms are so high in nutrients that Pahat just needs to eat a bunch of them and he'll be full. How do they swim? If they are so big, how can they move their bodies? So Pahat has many muscles and he has very strong flippers and a very strong tail. So as Pahat swims, what he's doing is he kicks the ocean, which propels him forward, and he also uses his flippers to propel himself forward as well. But he's using these flippers to swim and steer. So he propels and then he steers. That answers your question. If their bodies are so big, it actually makes them move faster. Even though they seem really slow, Pahat can actually move 75 miles in one day in the ocean. Do whales hang out with other species? Actually, I have some photos of Point Dume where we see whales hanging out with other whales. So this photo is actually of the backs of some whales. So we see them as they're diving and we see their back, and you can see a blow remain. And here you can see a big blowhole. This is a very good picture of a blowhole. So you can see both blowholes open after he released his blow. And whale's blow is actually hot compressed air. And this hot compressed air is released, and once it touches the surface of the ocean, it creates condensation. And this condensation is like steam, or when we are in the cold and we breathe out. We see two whales together. swimming, splashing around. Here's a fluke. It's kind of hard to see. And here's my last photo. Can we see the whale? This is at Point Dume. He's right at the bottom, in the middle of the screen. Actually, here's another one of their backs. And here's a really nice photo. But anyways, I was trying to find a photo of when they swim together because they swim with other species like dolphins and seals when they're feeding. So if there's a lot of food around, these species will actually work together and they'll swim together. Do I have any more questions? All right, everybody. Well, I want to thank you for joining me today and learning about the gray whale road trip. And thank you for learning about Point Dume State Beach.